Losing everything? Why Buddhism says your money is not your wealth. The news can be very worrisome when you think of all the dangers that face us and that face of the people we love. Many of us have relatives who are high risk. And then there's a larger picture of what will happen to the economy, the society. It's very easy to get overcome by worry, but being overcome by worry is not going to solve anything. As the Buddha said, worry is a hindrance, one of the obstacles we have to get over if we want to act skillfully in life. One of the first things you have to remember is that what's going to happen in the future has always been uncertain. We make plans, and sometimes the situation allows for those plans to come out as we hoped. Other times it doesn't. The times when it doesn't, what are you going to fall back on? Well, you fall back on the qualities of mind that you've developed, the qualities of heart, the qualities of the character, to help you figure out a solution. And those qualities are things we develop as we practice the Dhamma. When you're facing uncertain situations, you need mindfulness to keep in mind what's important, what's not important, what's skillful, what's not. You need alertness to notice what has actually happened as the situation changes, becomes unexpected, and you need ardency, the strength to keep on wanting to do things well. Those are precisely the qualities you develop as you meditate. So when worries begin to eat away at your meditation, you have to remind yourself that meditation is actually a much better preparation for the future than any amount of worrying. We get the mind in the present moment, not just for the sake of the present moment, but also for the sake of the future, so that we'll have good qualities, good habits to fall back on. So as you're mindful of the breath, you're getting ready for the future. As you're alert to the breath, as you're alert to what your mind is doing right now, you're getting ready for the future. And as you're ardent in trying to do this well, in other words, do it skillfully, that's getting ready for the future too. You also want to train yourself not to be overcome by pain, not overcome by pleasure, what the Buddha calls being developed in body and developed in mind. And you do that by getting the mind into a good state of concentration. As you focus on the breath, then when you meet up with pains in the body, you don't let yourself get chased away from the present moment. You stay here, you face them, and you have tools to deal with them so that the pain doesn't scare you. You can breathe through the pain. You can breathe around the pain. If the pain doesn't change, you can focus on some other part of the body where you can develop a sense of well-being. In that way, even though there is pain, you're not overcome. The same with pleasure. Pleasure comes up as you get comfortable with the breath. If you're not careful, you go wallowing in the pleasure and you forget the breath. And either the concentration disintegrates or you move into what's called delusion concentration, where you're still quiet, but you don't really know where you are. There's no alertness, no ardency. In that case, you've been overcome by the pleasure. The right course is that when there's pleasure, you learn how to use it as a source of inner strength. You understand the causes that it comes from. In other words, your continuous attention to the breath, so you stick with the causes. Then you learn how to make the best use of the comfort. Spread it around. Learn how to breathe in a way that feels good regardless of the situation in the body, and you have something you can fall back on. Because if you want to think straight, you need a sense of well-being inside. Otherwise, the mind will be hungry, desperate, and will jump at anything. So again, you're training the mind not to be overcome by pleasure, not overcome by pain. You're not only establishing something good here in the present moment, but you're also doing this for the sake of the future. You will need these abilities when things get difficult, when unexpected things happen, when unfortunate things happen. You'll have something good inside to fall back on as your inner resource. It's also important that you have some discernment. And here, the discernment comes in having a sense of priorities, realizing that everything we have in life we're going to have to lose, except for one thing that we don't have to lose, and that's the skillfulness of our actions. And fortunately, that's our most important resource, our most important treasure inside. The body will have to lose. Our relatives will have to lose. Society will break down at some point, whether it happens while we're alive or after we die. But if it doesn't break down before we die, the fact that we're dying means that society is not going to be much help at that point. What will be of help is the fact that we've maintained our devotion to being skillful, and we see that as our top priority. The Buddha himself talks about this in his discussion of loss. He says there are 5 kinds of loss. The first 3 are loss of relatives, loss of wealth, loss of your health. And those kinds of loss, he says, are not serious. They're going to happen at some point anyhow. There was a woman I knew in Thailand who lived down near the monastery, and she started having dreams. Some spirits came to her in a dream and told her that they wanted to use her as a medium. She refused. They said, "Well, if you don't become our medium, your father's going to die, your mother's going to die." And even in the dream, she had the good sense to say, "Well, they're going to die someday anyhow. But being a medium is a miserable life. If you could guarantee that they won't die if I became a medium, that would be one thing. But they're going to die regardless." The spirits went away and left her alone. She had a clear sense of priorities, a clear sense of the fact that loss will have to happen, but you don't want to lose your good character out of fear of loss. There's a saying that's popular among the military in Thailand. Be willing to sacrifice your wealth for the sake of maintaining your body. Be willing to sacrifice parts of your body to save your life, and be willing to sacrifice your life to save your honor. Now, we can interpret the word honor here as being your willingness to do only what is good, only what is skillful, and your unwillingness to do what is unskillful. And in that case, this principle is a good one to keep in mind as a Dhamma practitioner. In terms of the 5 kinds of loss of relatives, loss of health, loss of wealth, are unimportant when faced with loss of honor in the Buddhist sense. The serious losses in the Buddha's eyes are loss of right view and loss of your virtue. Those are things you want to hold on to, and those are things that no one else can take away, unless you let them. Those are things you do not have to lose, no matter how bad the situation gets. But you have to be willing to make some sacrifices. And as long as you can accept the fact that life will involve sacrifices, and you can keep in mind what's important, then you can keep your head in any situation. The concentration, the mindfulness, the alertness, the ardency are there to help keep you strong in those decisions. But the discernment is what's paramount. Here again, as I've said many times, discernment is a value judgment. You want to make sure that your values are in line with the fact that, yes, we do have to face loss in life. With the people we love, if we don't go first, they'll go first. The things we love, again, they may leave us or we may leave them. But our virtue, our right views, those are things we don't have to give up. If we give them up, we've made a foolish choice, a foolish trade. If we maintain them, they'll stay with us. They'll support us. There's a passage in the Ajahn Mun biography where someone comes and asks Ajahn Mun about the relationship between virtue and the mind. And Ajahn Mun says that you can't separate the two. If you could separate the two, there'd be cases where people's virtue could be stolen. But the truth is, if you have the virtue, nobody can steal it from you. It's what they call a noble treasure, something that supports you in this life and will support you as you go to the next life and can support you all the way to point where you don't have to be reborn at all and won't need any further support. That's something you don't want to sacrifice. So have a clear notion of what's worth giving up for the sake of what. And if you have at the top of your list the things that you protect at all times, your right views, your virtue, then you can face any danger. And although you may have to lose people who are dear to you, lose your health, maybe even lose your life, you've still got something of permanent worth, and that you don't have to worry about. It'll support you always. Don't worry. Be focused. In several passages in the canon, the Buddha says that the main thing to keep in mind if you suddenly find yourself approaching death is not to worry. Now, he's not saying don't worry about the state of your mind, or don't worry, everything is going to be okay, or don't worry, be happy. He's basically saying don't worry, be focused, stay centered and still, because the mind is going to grab at things if it hasn't been trained. If you've been responsible for various things in your life, you suddenly realize you can't be responsible for them anymore. If you're attached to certain things, you have to let go. And for the untrained mind, that's very difficult. You're going to flail around, trying to grab onto things that you can't grab onto anymore, and to weigh yourself down with concerns about things you can't be responsible for anymore, which is why you have to practice ahead of time. As Ajahn Fuang used to say, when you meditate, you're actually practicing how to die. You drop all your other concerns and focus on the state of your mind. While you have a breath to focus on, you focus on the breath as a place to gather the mind, and then you try to make sure that it doesn't go sticking its arms or head out like a turtle. A turtle is in its shell, there's a fox outside, and the turtle knows that if it sticks its head out, or its tail, or any of its legs, the fox is going to get it, so it has to stay inside its shell. This is a skill you have to practice because it's so easy, as you tell yourself you're going to stay with the breath. For other members of the mind's committee to have other ideas. Here, you've got a whole hour. You could think about all kinds of things, and as soon as your mindfulness lapses, or your alertness lapses, there they go. The mind goes out for two sorts of reasons. One is because of misunderstanding, and two, something's wrong with your energy. Now, if it's a case of misunderstanding, the mind tells itself you would really rather think about this, or you've got to think about that, whatever. You have to learn to reason with those voices, to tell them, no, this is not the time for that. No matter how compelling the worries may be, you have to learn how to say, no, we can't go there right now. One of the best arguments when you're worried about how things could get really bad is to remind yourself that you don't really know exactly how things could get really bad, but you do know that regardless, you're going to need mindfulness, alertness, concentration, and discernment to deal with whatever the situation is. Now, where are you going to get those qualities? You can get them only by developing them through the practice. This is what you're doing right now. Here is your opportunity to practice. So this is the best way to prepare for anything that's going to be difficult. That's one example. You'll have to find in your own case what the best arguments are for all your different defilements. This is a lot of what discernment is about. Sometimes people think that discernment is simply learning how not to think at all. You just watch arising and passing away and just let it arise and pass away. And that's it. But as long as there are any bits and pieces of misunderstanding hanging around in the mind is going to have its surreptitious ways of sneaking out again. So you have to look and see where the mind still has some mistaken ideas that would compel it to want to go after, say, sensual thinking or worries about this, worries about that. Then you learn how to cut those ideas short. Try to find some way to go straight for the jugular. The more you can find the heart of whatever the misunderstanding is, go straight for that, because you're trying to kill off your misunderstandings as quickly as possible, so you can get back to work on your concentration as quickly as possible. That's how you deal with the distractions that come from misunderstanding. As for the ones that come from an imbalance in your energy, you have to deal with them by trying to bring the energy back into balance. Sometimes it's a physical energy. When the body is all wired and the mind is bouncing around like a ping pong ball, you've got to find some place in the body where the energy is solid and still. It's there. The body has many layers of energy, many different types of energy, so look for the counteracting energy. Where is there a sense of stillness inside? It might be in your bones. Your bones are very still. They're not wired. So think about your bones, how they just sit there, solid and heavy. Try to breathe in a way that allows you to get in touch with that sense of heaviness, solidity, to anchor you. Focus as much as possible on that. There are other times when the distractions are more due to a low level of energy. A lot of the distractions come because you're just too weak to keep things in mind. You've been working hard all day. The mind feels weak, the body feels weak, and thoughts are just wandering all over the place with no specific purpose. It's not that you feel a real need to think about these other things. It's just that your energy is so low that whatever comes popping up through the nervous system pops right into the mind, and you don't have any defense against it. So you've got to find where your strength is. Ajahn Lee talks about the energy that comes up the back of the spine. You might want to focus on that for a while, or just make up your mind you're going to focus on one little point in the body and just really stay right there and try to develop the quality of awareness that's like listening very intently for very subtle sounds. You don't hold anything back. You focus right in and stay right in. That way you gather whatever little energy you have and give it a charge. As you bring these energies together, they can begin to nourish one another. This is especially important when you find that the body is weak. When you're working with the breath and the body is still functioning, you find that there are different sources of energy in different parts of the body you can draw on. Ajahn Lee also talks about being sensitive to outside energies. Different places have different kinds of energy. Different species of trees have different energies. In some of the places where you meditate, the energy is healthy and helpful. In other places, it's not so helpful. So you have to learn how to tune into the levels of energy that are actually going to help you. If the energies from outside are not so helpful, you have to fill the body with your own energy to help keep them out. But there will come times when you're really sick, and there doesn't seem to be anything in the body that gives you any source of energy. That's where you've got to depend on the mind. The Buddha enumerated 5 kinds of mental strength: conviction, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. You've got to find your energy here, and the energy starts with your understanding that your actions matter. That's what conviction is all about, and that can make a difference. But there are some areas where your actions can't make a difference. That's where you have to drop any worries you might have. The Buddha lists 3 things that people might be worried about as they're approaching death. They might be worried about their children, their family, or they might be worried about their parents, or they might be concerned about the pleasures they're going to have to leave. Here we are in the human realm with all its human pleasures. You start thinking about the fact that you won't sense these pleasures anymore. You won't see any beautiful sunsets. You won't see any rock canyons. You won't taste any delicious food. All the other pleasures you can think of. You have to put them aside. And one of the ways you can deal with that is to realize that there are better pleasures on other levels of being up in the heavens. There's a sutta where the Buddha advises a person who's counseling someone who's dying to say, well, there are better pleasures than that. When you get the person focused on one level of heaven, you say, well, there are better pleasures than that. When the person is focused on the Brahma worlds, you tell the person that even those Brahma pleasures are inconstant. They're not going to last. Brahmas still have self-identity, which means they still suffer, even if it's only a subtle level. If the mind is really ready, it can actually let go at that point. As for the things you might be worried about, you have to remind yourself that there comes a point where you have to put everything down. You can't carry the world around, or as they say in Thailand, you can't hold up the sky forever. When you see that those things are beyond you, you have to realize, okay, you did what you could. That's as far as you can get with that particular issue, that particular responsibility. Maybe someone else will pick it up, but even if they don't pick it up, you can't worry about that anymore. Your worries aren't going to help the situation. You've developed the perfections that come from working at that task, and what's left is the dregs. As Ajahn Lee said, it's like squeezing juice out of a piece of fruit. You've got the juice, and what's left of the fruit after you've taken the juice is just dregs. The juice is the good quality of the mind that you've developed. Don't forget that. Hold on to that. And to whatever extent you're able to be mindful, to be alert, you just keep at it. Keep at it. Keep at it. Don't give up. Have the conviction that fires your persistence, that enables you to stay mindful and alert. And the continuity of mindfulness and alertness is what develops concentration. At the very least, you want to stay really focused. When you can start making distinctions, the pain that's coming in, the sense of weakness, the sense of being overwhelmed, whatever. Just see that whatever as an object of the mind, whereas your awareness is something else. This is where discernment comes in and starts seeing the distinctions. There's the awareness of the feeling, but then the feeling itself is something else. Stay with the awareness. This is a constant theme throughout the wilderness tradition. When Ajahn Mahabua gave those talks to the woman with cancer, that was one of the themes he repeated over and over again. Learn how to see the distinction between your awareness and the pain. In the talk we had from Ajahn Chah last night, that again was the message. The pain is one thing, the awareness is something else. Learn how to see that they really are distinct. They're already distinct. It's simply that we, in our ignorance, glom them together. Now this kind of discernment requires that you be really, really still to see these distinctions. If the mind is running around, the distinctions are going to be blurred. But when you're really still, you see that things actually do separate out that way. And the reason you didn't see that was because you were running past all the time. So that's the energy of the mind. It's a focusing in with the determination that you don't want to come back and suffer anymore. As for anything that pulls you away from that determination, that distracts you from that determination, you've got to learn how to drop it, drop it, drop it. All the stories, all the narratives that you tell yourself about who you are, what your responsibilities are, and what's going to happen in the world, what's going to happen to your family, your friends, all the projects that you take on. You need a spot in the mind where those things just don't matter. where the quality of your mind, the quality of your awareness does matter. So you've got to stay focused. You've got to learn how to develop this quality of staying focused, of not letting yourself get distracted by whatever stories or narratives or sense of responsibility you may have, or fear that you're going to miss out on something. The really important things are right in here. So, as we meditate, we're basically learning two things: the right way of understanding all this, and the right way of bringing your energy to bear to develop this focus. When they talk about making the mind one, it's both a matter of the singleness of your focus and also of making the mind your first priority. This is the number one thing you need to work on, the number one thing of real value. I've always found it strange that people say that there's no essence to the Buddha's teachings, that the Buddha taught. There is no such thing as essence. This comes from a modern academic prejudice against what they call essentialism. They like to see the Buddha as an early critic of essentialism, claiming that the Buddha denied the existence of any essence in you or in his teachings or in anything at all. But the Buddha never taught that. He said that there is one thing of essence, and that's release. The mind, when it's totally free. That has true value, essential value. So when you're making your mind one, it's both to bring it all together and to make that sense of release its one object, its one priority. That's what this practice is all about.